There's a secret from Japan that can turn any regular person into someone who never stops learning. You know what's ironic? The more you're convinced you know, the less you actually learn, right up until the moment you come across this. Have you ever noticed how a 3-year-old picks up more in a single year than most grown-ups do in 10? That child isn't driven by motivation, discipline, music, or some detailed study schedule. Yet everything gets absorbed just like a sponge. What's behind that? The answer is something Zen masters in Japan figured out 8 centuries ago, and now modern brain scientists are finally starting to confirm it. There's a particular way of thinking that turns your brain into a non-stop learning powerhouse. The Japanese word for this is Shoshin, which means approaching things as a beginner. And when you bring Shoshin together with 2 other strong ideas, Shunryu, which is the natural flow of growth and mastery, and music, the path that goes on forever, you unlock something almost startling. The power to pick up anything, no matter your age, music without ever getting stuck. But the issue is, most people have lost this by the time they're 25. Their brains essentially begin to power down. Music, you catch yourself saying, "This just isn't for me. I'm past the age for this. New things are beyond me." And you buy into these falsehoods until the truth finally reveals itself. Before I share the account of how an everyday guy stumbled upon this secret and totally turned his existence around, I'd like to ask you to think about subscribing to the channel, Music, drop a like down below, and leave a comment. What's a skill you've dreamed of acquiring, but you feel music? The moment has passed. Doing that really assists me in getting to know you more and allows me to create even more valuable music content. So, let's get back to the story. Chapter 1. The man who stopped believing in himself. Alexander was 32 and had spent close to 10 music years at a mechanic's garage. A solid, diligent guy, the type clocking in at 7 in the morning and out at 7 at night, smeared with oil, some music worn out, yet satisfied knowing he'd provided for his family. But inside, Alexander was carrying a hidden burden, a quiet irritation that ate away at him constantly. He'd watched the people bringing in their cars, the lawyers, the physicians, the entrepreneurs, with vehicles costing what he made in 3 years. The thought would cross his mind. What's their secret? Are they just sharper than me? Did they have things handed to them from birth? Alexander held on to aspirations. He dreamed of studying engineering, to really grasp how engines operated, not merely how to patch them up. He dreamed of launching his own enterprise, music. He dreamed of having enough so the month's end didn't mean scrimping on every cent. He dreamed of getting fit, building strength, having the vitality to run around with his kids without getting winded. But whenever he considered starting, a louder inner voice would protest. "You're 32. The window's closed. You barely got through high school. How could you possibly handle engineering? Music, you just don't have what it takes. There's no time. There's no money." And he accepted this, because society had drilled it into him for ages. There's a certain period for learning. Music, you acquire knowledge when you're young. Past 30, your brain is pretty much set. It's finished. That's the message Alexander absorbed over many years. So Alexander just drifted through life. Home, job, job, home. Music weekends meant trying to recover from the endless tiredness. Bills settled at the last possible moment with nothing extra. No advancement, no real prospects, simply getting by, until a day came that turned everything upside down. Chapter 2. The day everything crumbled. It happened on a Saturday. Alexander was at home, savoring an uncommon moment of calm. His wife Sarah was tidying up, getting the house in order as she did to music every weekend. He was stretched out on the sofa scrolling through his phone, too drained even to properly watch her music TV. Out of nowhere, a cry echoed through the house. "Alex! Alex, come quick. Help me!" He leaped off the sofa and hurried to the kitchen. There was Sarah on the floor, clutching her arm, her face twisted in agony. She'd slipped on the wet floor and come down hard on her arm. The pain was so sharp, she was certain it was broken. Alexander felt a surge of panic. He bent over, attempting to lift her and get her to the car, but he couldn't manage it. His arms shook, his back seized up. He just didn't possess the physical power to pick up his own wife. 10 years of tough work in the garage, yet he'd never actually conditioned his body. He'd never looked after himself properly. And now, when it counted most, he'd come up short. He helped Sarah to her feet, steadying her by her uninjured arm. They made their way to the car, each step causing her more torment. Alexander drove to the hospital, his hands and music shaking on the wheel. But it wasn't just worry for Sarah. Another thought was pounding in his mind. What's this going to cost? They lived right on the edge financially. They could cover the regular bills, but there was never anything saved. Now, a hospital visit, X-rays, possibly a cast, medication. He already knew their budget was about to be blown. At the hospital, after a 3-hour wait that seemed to stretch her music for 3 days, they got the news. It wasn't a break, but it was a bad injury, a severe bone bruise. The treatment would involve music immobilization, physical therapy. The charge came to over $1,000, money they simply didn't have. Alexander signed the paperwork, got Sarah home, settled her on the couch with pain relief, and once she finally drifted off, he sat alone in the dark kitchen, and music wept. Not just because of the bill, but because of what it signified. He worked 12 hours a day and couldn't look after his own family in a crisis. He couldn't even lift his wife when she needed him. He couldn't handle an unexpected expense without going into debt. That night, Alexander got no sleep. He stayed in the kitchen until dawn, holding the most genuine conversation of his existence with the music himself. I have to make a change. This can't continue. I won't be this man anymore. But how? Chapter 3. A desperate hunt. When Monday came around, Alexander found it impossible to focus at work. His thoughts were elsewhere. He'd come to a decision. Transformation was necessary. He would study. He would boost his income. He would get his body in shape. He would turn into the man his family merited. But there was a hurdle. He had no clue where to even start. That evening after work, he grabbed his phone and began searching. How to increase income. How to resume studying after 30. How to launch a business with no experience. The algorithms quickly picked up on it. Within a couple of days, his feed was overflowing. Financial advisors promising huge monthly earnings, productivity experts with perfect daily routines, business courses titled things like 0 to $1 million in 1 year. Alexander consumed it all obsessively. He watched clips until 2 in the morning. He bought numerous courses. He filled up spreadsheets. He took music notes. Knowing his funds were tight, he felt he needed more knowledge, so he often split course payments onto his credit card. He signed up for a finance program, music. The teacher guaranteed to reveal methods for growing wealth. Alexander showed up for every session, did all the tasks. He attempted to put them into practice. Music, nothing happened. The method itself wasn't the issue. The real problem was that he didn't have much money to begin with. Music, he required something that needed minimal upfront cash and could produce reasonably fast returns. He bought another program. This one claimed to teach online music selling. Work from your home, earn in foreign currency. Alexander gave it 3 weeks. He set up profiles, listed products, used what little money he had on advertising, but not a single item moved. He abandoned it. He experimented with another Shi music one, and then another, and another. Every course swore it was different, Shi music that it was the final answer, the one that would eventually deliver results. But nothing held. Alexander was growing more irritated, more exhausted, and on top of that, he was using money he couldn't spare on programs that produced nothing. He started listening to those inner doubts again. You're just not up to it. You don't have the smarts. Others pull it off, but not you. It was then that Sarah, still on the mend from her arm injury, sat down with him in the kitchen one night and made a remark that shifted everything. Alex, you're attempting to bypass the necessary stages. You want fast results, but you aren't genuinely absorbing anything. You're just taking in data, expecting it to magically change you. Have music, but that's not how real change works. Alexander looked at her, puzzled. So, what's the right way? Sarah just shrugged. I can't say for sure, but I know your current approach isn't it. That conversation stuck with him, bothering him. And the next night, ham music, while endlessly scrolling through the never-ending stream of guarantees and easy answers, a clip showed up that stood out from anything he'd encountered before. The title was simple. Shoshin, why did you stop learning? The person in the video wasn't shouting. There were no fast money promises. A music, no magic formulas for sale. He was simply explaining, telling a story, discussing Japanese philosophy and the process of learning. Alexander almost scrolled past. Yet something prompted him to click, and over the following 15 minutes, everything he'd assumed about learning got completely turned around. Chapter 4 Shoshin. Shi music, the revelation. The man in the video had Japanese heritage. He started by recounting something the Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki, Shi music, once said, a phrase that became legendary. In the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's there are few. Alexander stopped the video. He went over the sentence again and again. Something clicked inside him. The man continued, the main obstacle for adults isn't a shortage of capability. It's an overabundance of certainty. You believe you understand how things operate. You think you're aware of your boundaries. You assume you know what you can or cannot master. And these fixed ideas imprison Shi music you. Alexander felt like a light had been switched on in a dark room. Shoshin translates to beginner's mind. It's the capacity to encounter any situation, even ones you're familiar with, as though it were your first time, without preconceived notions. Shi music, without ego, without the dread of appearing foolish, armed only with pure inquisitiveness. The fundamental idea of Shoshin involves maintaining an attitude that is open, eager, and free from bias when delving into a subject, regardless of your current expertise level. A beginner's mind is considered the perfect state for picking up any skill or discipline. Since the beginner carries fewer assumptions, a beginner has no fixed expectations or ideas about how things should unfold. An expert, on the other hand, frequently holds a strict set of correct methods that can block them from seeing fresh opportunities. The beginner's mind is also receptive to possibilities. In the beginner's head, countless possibilities exist. In the expert's head, only a few remain. Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki made this idea famous in his book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. This mindset also preserves enthusiasm. Adopting this way of thinking restores the novelty and curiosity Shi music that often fade once we grow too comfortable or overly sure of our own understanding. Shoshin is a wonderful philosophy that pushes us to keep learning throughout our lives. The video then highlighted the clear Shi music contrast between two types of individuals. The typical grown-up signing up for a Spanish class thinks, I've made 3 attempts to learn Spanish already and didn't succeed. Languages just aren't my thing. This will probably be another waste of time. That kind of person shows up already beaten. Their mind is sealed off. Every error just reinforces the belief that they're incapable of music, of doing it. Within 3 weeks, they quit. A child walks into that same class carrying none of those beliefs. The child doesn't reflect on being good or bad at languages. The child just explores. Her music messes up without feeling ashamed, gives it another go, messes up again, and keeps trying. Their mind stays wide open, and in half a year, that child is speaking. The gap isn't about brain power, her music, it's about mentality. It's Shoshin. The person in the video then posed a question that really hit Alexander. How many things might you have already mastered in your life if you hadn't decided you weren't capable before you even truly attempted them? Alexander stopped the video once more and came to a painful realization. He'd never genuinely tried to learn anything. He'd taken in information, but true learning never happened, because each time he attempted something new, he began with the certainty that music, it likely wouldn't pan out for him. He didn't possess the beginner's mind. He had the mindset of someone already defeated. The video went on to present 2 further concepts that rounded out the whole picture. Shoshin is merely the beginning. But how do you continue to develop while holding on to that open mindset? The Japanese came up with an idea called Shunryu. Shu means you follow the rules strictly. Music, you imitate the teacher. No inventing on your own. No altering things. No thinking you know better. You just soak in the pure method. Ha! Comes next. Once you've truly mastered the fundamentals, you start to consciously music move beyond them. You adjust. You try new approaches. You discover your own style. Finally, music is the stage where you move past the rules altogether. You no longer have to think about them. You've embodied the practice. The rules express themselves through you naturally, and all of this takes place inside a bigger framework called do, which means the path. You're not learning just to arrive at some finish line. You're on a continuous journey, and that journey has no conclusion. Music, you never truly arrive. You're perpetually in a state of learning. The video wrapped up with an offer. The person was promoting a coaching program where he showed how to bring these concepts into everyday life. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't exorbitantly priced either. And for the first time in many months, Alexander felt a different kind of emotion. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't the allure of quick gains. It was a sense of clarity. Music, something that finally made logical sense. He enrolled in that coaching program that very night. Chapter 5, Mentoring. Kaizen and Ikigai. The initial session with the mentor came as a jolt to Alexander. He was anticipating formulas, systematic steps. Music, a straightforward blueprint for instant wealth. What he encountered was completely distinct. The mentor opened with a query. What's driving your desire to change your life? Alexander answered immediately, I need to earn a better living. I want to provide more for my family. I want to get music stronger physically. The mentor shook his head. Those are outcomes, not root causes. Why do you truly want those things? Alexander fell silent. Nobody had ever inquired like that before. Because I feel like I've failed. Because I need to demonstrate to myself that I'm capable. Because I won't accept just scraping by for the rest of my days. The mentor nodded. No, that's getting somewhere. That's a genuine reason, an ikigai, a profound purpose. The mentor explained further. The Japanese believe each of us has an ikigai, the intersection between what you're passionate about, what you're skilled at, what the world requires, and what can provide an income. Music, but before you can find that, you need to honestly answer, what truly gets you out of bed each morning? What would keep you striving music even when there's no instant payoff? For Alexander, the answer grew clear. He didn't want to stay the man who couldn't support his own wife. He didn't want his kids growing up with an image of a beaten-down father. He wanted, above all, to prove to himself after music that real change was achievable. That was his ikigai. And once he pinpointed it, everything shifted, because he now had a fundamental guide. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about growing into someone deserving of his own respect. The mentor then brought in the next vital concept, Kaizen. Kaizen stands for continuous improvement, but it's not about making huge leaps, music. It's about getting just 1% better every single day. People fall short because they want massive results right away. They aim to overhaul their lives in a month, music, and when that doesn't materialize, they quit. The mentor showed the numbers. If you enhance by 1% daily, over a year you'll be 37 times improved, not just 365%, but 37 times. The reason is that growth compounds. It's exponential, not a straight line. But there's a catch: that 1% is invisible. You can't music sense it. You won't spot it in the mirror. You won't see it reflected in your bank balance. And that's precisely why most individuals stop, because they expect to notice progress each day. Music. When they don't feel it, they conclude the system is broken. The key is to embrace the process without demanding instant proof. You place your trust in the approach. You keep doing the work. And eventually, you'll hear music, look back and recognize you've become almost unrecognizable. Alexander grasped this. Music, he'd spent months hunting for the quick route, the secret formula, the ultimate program. But no such music shortcut existed. There was only the path, the dough. And along that path, you get better by 1% each day through Kaizen, steered by your ikigai, always preserving Shoshin, that receptive mindset of a novice. The next question was, where to actually begin? Chapter 6. The initial move. Shohari put into practice. The mentor set Alexander a task that seemed almost too music, basic to be effective. Choose 3 parts of your life you want to improve. Use Shohari for each one. Start with music, stick to the methods of someone who's already skilled. Don't try to innovate. Just copy. Alexander picked 3 domains: physical health, mental growth, financial stability. For his body, he knew nothing about proper training, so he wasn't going to attempt anything clever. Music. He went to the nearest gym, asked a friend who worked as a personal trainer for assistance. He requested a simple strength routine and adhered to it, strictly 3 music times weekly. No alterations, no skipping exercises, no assuming he knew more. This was pure Shu mindset. He aimed to study engineering, but the basics were missing. So he began at square one. He located a free online class covering basic music high school physics. Yes, it was material for teenagers. Yes, he was 32 years old. It made no difference. Shoshin, beginner's mind, no bruised ego, just learning. For money, he had no clue about handling finances. Music. So he followed a proven method exactly as written. He got a Shen music fundamental book on household budgeting, applied the system precisely, tracked every single cent, and reduced spending according to the book's directions, without cutting himself any slack. The initial 30 days were the most irritating stretch of his life, because nothing seemed to alter. Physically, the mirror showed no change. Mentally, he still felt foolish reviewing basic physics. Financially, money remained tight. However, his mentor had readied him for this. Kaizen isn't something you feel, it's something you do. You might not sense advancement in the early days, yet you maintain faith in the process. So Alexander pushed forward, 1% per day, Shay music unseen, yet steady. Around week 6, something began to shift. He was at the gym, doing the same exercises he'd performed for 6 weeks. And suddenly he noticed he was lifting 10 kilos more. than when he'd started. He hadn't detected the improvement while it was happening, because it had been so gradual. But looking back, the evidence was clear. Week 8 arrived. While studying physics, a concept that had seemed impossible 3 weeks prior suddenly made sense. His brain had taken it in without his conscious awareness. Neural links forming, sheet music comprehension emerging. By week 10, he checked his financial spreadsheet and hey, music saw, for the first time in years, some money remaining at month's end. Not a huge amount, but there was a surplus. The progress hadn't appeared all at once. It had built up quietly, 1% daily, invisible, music until it became undeniable. And in that moment, Alexander grasped something profound about Shahari. You begin in Shu, following the guidelines. At first, it's irritating because you don't comprehend the reason behind each action. You just trust and carry out the steps. Yet as you music keep practicing, you start to intuitively sense why those rules exist. You start to understand the underlying principles. And when that understanding dawns, you smoothly move into Ha. You start to modify. You test variations. You discover what suits you specifically. Alexander began adjusting his training to match Ain music, his personal objectives. He started exploring physics, subjects that linked to engines and mechanical engineering. He began adapting his budget to fit his unique situation. He was no longer blindly replicating music. He was employing principles with genuine insight. He was advancing along the path. 3 months following his wife's accident, Alexander was a transformed individual. Physically stronger, music, mentally more self-assured, financially more secure. Most importantly, though, he had demonstrated to himself that change and musica was genuinely possible, and that's when an idea struck him. Chapter 7. The idea takes shape. Alexander was in the garage as usual, fixing an engine. But something had changed. Nowadays, as he worked, his comprehension ran much deeper. His studies in physics and mechanics were altering how he perceived his labor. While looking at that engine, the idea emerged. What if I didn't just repair music cars, but actually crafted custom components? The garage where he was employed handled only routine maintenance, music. Yet Alexander was aware of a significant demand for tailored parts, particularly among owners of classic cars and Heikei music enthusiasts seeking particular performance upgrades. He started investigating during lunch breaks at work, in the evenings before sleeping, always applying Shoshin, the beginner's outlook. He knew nothing about part manufacturing, so he was prepared to acquire that knowledge. He located online communities for mechanics and engineers. He started posing inquiries, questions that could be seen as naive, questions that a mechanic with 10 years of experience might be too embarrassed to ask. But Alexander had set aside his ego. He possessed Shoshin, and people music responded. They shared their knowledge freely. Meanwhile, he intensified his formal studies. He registered for a technical course in mechanical engineering. Alexander had no free time during the day. Music, so he studied in the evenings. However, if he felt too spent after work, he'd go to bed early and rise at 5:00 a.m. to get in an hour of study before heading to the garage. Kaizen, 1% each day. A single hour of daily study may appear insignificant, but over a year, that totals 365 hours, more than 15 complete days devoted purely to music learning. Sarah observed the change occurring and gave him her full encouragement. "This is the man I chose," she remarked one evening. "Not the defeated soul on the couch 3 months ago. This is the genuine you." Alexander commenced on a small scale. He took on a basic project, making custom engine mounts for a particular classic car model. He handled the design and calculations, then contracted out music, the actual manufacturing, to a neighborhood metal shop. He produced 5 units. He advertised them on specialized forums. All 5 were sold within 2 weeks. The earnings were modest, yet it marked a beginning. He put the money back in. He produced 10 more pieces. Every one sold. He reinvested once more. He made 20, and so the pattern continued. Half a year after that initial idea, Alexander had built a supplementary venture that Music was bringing in nearly as much as his regular job. But what mattered more was that he was directly implementing everything from his course into the music business. Theory and practice were strengthening each other. He was in the phase now, adjusting, music experimenting, forging his own distinctive route. A year later, he confronted the most frightening decision of his existence. He resigned from the garage and launched his own enterprise, a firm dedicated to high-performance custom parts. His co-workers thought he'd lost his mind. Music, you're going to abandon 10 years of security for some business venture that might flop. You've got a family, man. Don't do this. But Alexander possessed something they didn't have. Music, a clear sense of purpose. He understood exactly why he was doing it. It wasn't primarily about the money, though that was important. It was about evolving into his finest self. It was about showing that personal change is always possible. It was about existing within the way, instead of merely surviving. And when your purpose is clear, even the hardest choices become simple. Chapter 8. Transcendence. 2 years after that Saturday, when Sarah fell and Alexander couldn't lift her, his entire world had been remade. His business was expanding. He'd brought on several staff members. Music now produced parts for specialized garages across 3 different states. Money wasn't just arriving. Music, there was a comfortable surplus. For the initial time ever, Alexander had an emergency reserve. He had capital to invest. He enjoyed genuine financial stability. Physically, he was a different person. He kept up his 3 times a week training without fail. Now, carrying Sarah wasn't an issue. Music, he could lift both Sarah and their 2 children simultaneously, and he'd laugh while doing it. Mentally, he was midway through his 2nd year of engineering studies. Music, his marks surpassed those of students 10 years his junior, because while they studied out of duty, music, he approached it with Shoshin, pure curiosity, and the ability to directly apply what he learned. But the most profound shift was internal. Alexander was no longer the same man internally. He had moved past. He had entered He didn't consciously think about discipline anymore. He simply acted with discipline. Music, he didn't make a constant effort to learn. He simply absorbed things continuously. He didn't force himself to improve. Music improvement happened naturally, 1% daily, without deliberate effort. The guidelines he had adhered to initially, waking early, studying for an hour, training 3 times weekly, were no longer external rules he compelled himself to follow. They had become part of his fundamental character. Music, they were now his nature. This is when you transcend the rules because the rules now live through you. One day, a young employee named Marcus, aged 23, inquired, "Boss, how do you manage everything? Work, college, training, music, family. Don't you ever get exhausted?" Alexander smiled, recognizing the question from 2 years prior, when he'd looked at successful people and imagined they possessed something forever beyond his reach. "Marcus, can I let you in on something? 2 years ago, I believed I was over the hill. That it had grown too late music to pick up new things, to develop, to truly change. And you know what I found out?" "What?" "It's never too late. The obstacle wasn't my age. It was my whole way of thinking. I thought I was certain of my limits. I thought I knew what I could and couldn't do. But I knew nothing. I only carried fixed ideas that kept me trapped." Alexander then shared with Marcus the concepts of Shoshin, do, kaizen, and ikigai, the very same ideas that had reshaped his own existence. Marcus paid attention silently, taking in every word. At the finish, he asked, "So, this is something anyone can do?" Alexander met his gaze and answered with complete certainty. Anyone ready to set aside their ego and emerge again as someone who never stops learning. What I'm conveying in this video isn't merely old Japanese wisdom. Modern brain science is validating these ideas in remarkable ways. Dr. Carol Dweck, a psychologist at Stanford who has investigated learning for over 30 years, uncovered something groundbreaking. People with what she calls a growth mindset. The conviction that abilities can be cultivated, pick up new skills considerably faster than individuals with a fixed mindset. Hey music, the belief that talents are inborn. And what essentially separates these two mindsets? It's Shoshin, the beginner's mind, versus a mind that's already shut. Another compelling investigation tracked adults ranging from 25 to 65 as they acquired novel skills. Music. The conclusion reached was that actual age had zero connection to learning capability. Do you know what did have a connection? The person's belief in their own capacity to learn. 60-year-olds who were confident they could learn actually learned faster than 25-year-olds who believed they just weren't suited for it. Neuroscientist Hey Music, Dr. Andrew Huberman, explains that your brain keeps its neuroplasticity, the capacity to create fresh neural pathways, music throughout your whole life. However, this plasticity only gets switched on when you place yourself in a state of engaged learning, with concentrated attention, shishi music, and a readiness to get things wrong. In simpler terms, your brain can absorb anything at any stage of life, but only if you tackle it with Shoshin, humility, inquisitiveness, and an acceptance of error, rather than with ego and fear of looking unskilled. But there's a contradiction here that most individuals fail to notice. And it's exactly this contradiction that distinguishes those who genuinely reshape their existence from those who merely absorb motivational content and take 7 music, 0 action. The contradiction is this: Shoshin calls for deep humility. You must have music, admit you don't have the answers, that you might appear foolish, that you'll commit many errors. Some music, yet, at the very same time, you need absolute self-belief, the confidence that, despite all that, you will ultimately succeed. Humility combined with confidence. Accepting your beginner status while believing you can master anything. How can you sustain these two opposing forces simultaneously? Music, the solution resides in the path. You aren't trying to validate anything. You aren't aiming for a final endpoint where you've ultimately won at life. You are simply traveling the path. And while on the path, being a beginner music isn't some temporary flaw. It's a permanent state of development. Genuine masters never cease being students. Music, they merely evolve into more skilled students. Alexander fully understood this. Despite all his accomplishments, with his company expanding, having mastered things that once seemed out of reach, music, he held on to Shoshin. He still raised questions that some might consider foolish. He still operated on the assumption that vast amounts remained to be learned. He never believed he'd reached the ultimate destination. Music, he remained constantly on the path. And that's exactly the reason he kept progressing, while other people who achieved fast success in music became stuck and eventually started to regress. So, allow me to pose the essential inquiry. Where do you stand music currently? Are you the Alexander from 2 years back, convinced your best years are behind you, believing you lack the inherent ability, that music others can achieve things but you can't? Are you prepared to acknowledge the reality? Music, you don't actually know where your limits lie. You've never genuinely made an attempt with Shoshin. You've never granted yourself permission to be a novice, free from ego. Alexander's change didn't occur because he stumbled upon a music shortcut. It occurred because he demolished the fixed certainties that confined him and was reborn as an eternal apprentice. Let's go over everything we've discussed. Shoshin, the beginner's mindset, receptive, inquisitive, unafraid of errors. Shunryu, the inherent sequence of growth, first follow, then adapt, finally transcend. Do, the unending path. You never truly finish. You are forever evolving. Kaizen, getting 1% better each day. The invisible accumulation becoming undeniable. Ikigai, your fundamental motivation. The reason that makes rising each day and putting in the effort worthwhile. This constitutes the Japanese formula for never-ending learning. It isn't a quick fix. It isn't a shortcut. It's an entire approach to living. And once you welcome this, once you genuinely absorb these ideas into your core, music, you don't just alter what you know. You transform who you fundamentally are. If this video has shifted how you perceive learning and personal development, I'd like to invite you once more to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss upcoming content. And please tell me in the comments, what skill, music, have you long desired to acquire, but believed it was already too late? Let's show each other that the right time is always now. I also encourage you to view this video, currently showing on your screen. Perhaps you'll discover insights that can assist you even further. Keep in mind, a beginner's mind recognizes no boundaries. Music, only limitless opportunities. If you've stayed with me this far, I truly appreciate your attention. I'll see you in the next video.